if Leicester beat Man U 4-1, I will go into the street in as much. Hello and welcome to the First4LCFC Podcast with myself, Jamie Thorpe, and it was supposed to be a full roster of the First4LCFC admins, but sadly Edbert is having technical difficulties. But if he does randomly pop in, it's because he's managed to fire up his laptop from 2004 and he's actually joined. But Christian Mosen is on the line. How are you doing, mate? You okay?
I'm very well. I'm just chuckling to myself at Ed's paving slab laptop, as I like to call it. So I think we are actually trying to get him to download Skype on his phone, but I think he's going to have to delete about 7 apps to get space on his 2 megabyte iPhone. So we'll see how that goes. He might be here later on, he might not.
Yeah. For those that don't know, Ed is something of a technological hipster.
Neanderthal.
That's it, living some way in the past. But we'll move on, and hopefully we can add him in a little bit later, and he can do some more classic fence sitting. So look, Christian, let's start this podcast off on something of a positive note. Leicester have secured European football for next season, even if we do fail to qualify rather for the Champions League, which of course would be a disappointment. We do at least have the consolation prize of the Europa League group stages, which is great. But since our last pod, we've played 2 matches, 2 contrasting results, but arguably 2 fairly similar performances in a lot of ways. So let's start by looking at one of the positive themes in both games. We know Leicester's squad is being decimated by injury. I make it 6 first teamers all out. However, that's meant that some of our youth players have come through, one in particular being Luke Thomas. So he started the game as a left wing back. He's played all the way through in both matches. What have you made of him so far?
First of all, I think that was the longest question ever asked.
It's basically Luke Thomas thoughts, if I was to summarize.
I was going to say, I didn't see that point on the agenda. But Luke Thomas, I think he's come through as a bit of a shining light, as a cliche, in dark times for us as a club, really. He's come out of nowhere, and I think he's come onto the scene playing with that, that young confidence, and he's took his opportunity it perfectly, to be honest. So I can't really criticise him. I know I was doing the tweets on the account yesterday, and in description of the goal I said a lethargic touch from Thomas, and having watched that goal back a few times, the touch wasn't great, but maybe it's unfair to be that critical of him. But the way I see it is, if you're good enough, you're old enough, and you can take the criticism. And I'm sure he'll be watching that back disappointed, and it could have been a foul given against us, but ultimately, like I say, he's been a positive in a period of time that's not got that many positives.
Absolutely. So one of his key assets, it looks like, is his delivery, isn't it? He's sort of that nice little flat chopped cross, and of course we managed to get an assist in his first appearance.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think, well, obviously I've watched both games, but just yesterday, Aurier, at the best of times, is a loose cannon, but he was given so much space down that left side, and it's just unfortunate that one of those chances didn't get capitalised. I think on another day, we could have easily been 2 or 3 up, but again, I tweeted something like, there's no point looking at it as shoulda, woulda, coulda. Ultimately, we could have said that for 10 games this season. It's just not been there for us, and we need to work on our finishing. But in terms of his crossing style, I think we've been critical of Albrighton, namely recently, but he's getting the right sorts of crosses in for the players in the box. I'm not comfortable seeing floated deliveries to people like Perez or Vardy or even Iheanacho. Low driven crosses along the ground have been working well, and I don't doubt that he'll be registering a few more assists, especially next season.
Yes, and of course it looks likely that he's going to see out the rest of the season, with Chilwell and Fuchs likely to miss the game. So hopefully he continues in a similar sort of vein. But obviously we had a couple of other youngsters on the bench. Darnell Johnson didn't get a look in, but George HIRST did. So striker, doing very, very well in the development squad. He only had 10 minutes on the pitch, but he was pretty heavily involved. What were your impressions of him?
Well, I think he came on and got absolutely clattered within a few minutes, didn't he? Was it? So, welcome to the senior game, I think, was the message there. But again, it was that newfound confidence. I think he took a shot on from an absurd angle, striking across the ball, 30 yards out. But why not? We're 3-0 down. I think we registered like a record amount of attempts, albeit some of them were tragic, like Pratt's shot. But ultimately it goes down as an attempt on goal, and it's just to have that many attempts. I think it was like 22 or 23 in the end, and not a single goal is it's not ideal. But yeah, again, he came on and he had that sort of chutzpah about him, which is pleasing. And I think Ed's just popped up in the chat saying he's here, so let's introduce Edbert to the podcast. Better late than never.
Well, yeah, thank you. I am here now. We had some gremlins, and it's only taken me 20 minutes to work out how to get Skype on my phone, so we got there eventually. So, hi.
Well, let me be the first to welcome you into the 21st century. It's great to have you here. Right, we've just to catch you up, we've been talking about Leicester's youth products that have made their first team debuts over the last couple of games. Chris was reasonably promised about the prospects of Thomas and Hurst. What did you make of them both?
Thomas, in the last couple of games, especially against Sheffield United, I thought he stepped up well. Didn't really make any errors. Obviously helped in creating one of the goals. Good overall performance. I didn't think he was as good against Spurs, but I guess when you're coming up against seasoned pros in the likes of Son, Moura, Kane, etc., like, they're going to put any defender under pressure. So he didn't do badly. Don't get me wrong. I thought there were a few misplaced passes, but I do think he's been better than Albrighton at left back. So yeah, promising in that sense. Hurst, I don't know. He missed the sitter. Well, I guess it's easy to look at in hindsight. He should have probably done better, but I don't know. I just don't think he's ever going to get a look in. So there's not much he can do to get ahead of Vardy, Andy, and Nacho. So I mean, it's nice for a sort of end of season running just to give a couple of games, but yeah, there are other issues to look at. I think the fact we were literally bringing on young players and resting our star players because we'd already given up on a game that was a must win. So that's more of a concern for me.
Well, firstly, a little stat that popped up on Luke Thomas was that if you're into the whole, key passes and stuff, and per 90 minute per game rather, only one player is averaging more key passes than him. And I know he's only made 2 games, but that is quite a big call in terms of the Leicester having to rotate and bring off the likes of Tielemans and Barnes, etc. I mean, we mentioned the fact that Leicester had a lot of players out, Chris. I mean, there are 6 or 7 and a lot of them are key to the squad. Do you think many other clubs would be able to cope with losing that amount of first-team players?
I think it's relative to the squad size, if we're getting mathematical on it. I've been thinking about this in my pre-podcast musings, which I expose you to sometimes. I just think that we're so thinly spread that our backup players drop us from a Europa League contending or Champions League contending side to literally a relegation candidate. Like, let's theorise it this way. Say every team entered their second team into a league. Realistically, obviously, I don't know what Watford's second string is, but I just don't think. I think the quality difference will be a lot smaller than it is between our first team. So if that makes any sense to you, I just think that until we bolster our squad with players on a par or just a little bit below us, the gulf between our first and second team is miles apart, and it's leading to huge issues. So in answer to the question, I think Liverpool's second team, Man City's second team, Chelsea's second team next year, they'll be miles ahead. I think there'll be a big gap between third and fourth next season. Potentially even Arsenal could join that bracket. They're playing some impressive football. We'll see how that goes, but you can never count on Arsenal too early. But yeah, ultimately, I think there'll be a bigger gap, and I think there's a bigger and bigger gulf appearing between the top clubs and the rest.
So, I mean, yeah, I take your point completely. I think it does expose that we do have something of a thin squad, but we knew that. I don't think that's a surprise at all. But say if you look to the likes of Man United, who have obviously had this fantastic run of form. Fernandes has come in and he's sort of revolutionised that side. But say if they had the same injury, so they lost Fernandes, Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, and maybe one of their attacking three, would they still be the same sort of force, and would the drop-off be as considerable for them?
Well, yeah, Man United, you've probably picked a squad that you could argue either way on, couldn't you? Ultimately, there's just so many more factors, isn't there? You look at like their youth product. Famously, obviously, Man United have included a youth team player in like every squad for the last like 20 years or something. So historically, there's things that suggest teams like that still are better off, even if they lose their key players. I do think that Leicester City are, whilst we're run very well as a business, I just think we're starting to get exposed a little on a lack of transfer activity that is sort of exposing us for reasons that we are really quite far off being a settled Champions League contender. And maybe that Europa League is purely our level, because it's all well and good, joking, saying, oh, we're going to be playing against farmers from Estonia or something. But I'm not one of those who's laughing at that, because realistically, I think a lot of teams in Europe would give us a game, because ultimately they're going to see an English opposition and bring their A game to that game, which we're not necessarily used to, not being the underdogs.
I mean, we mentioned sort of half seriously, half jokingly last week about the fact that if we do end up in the Europa League and say that is our level, do we have a good chance of going on to win it? And I don't know. I mean, I think that I would land on the side that we'll definitely be competitive. But you're right, teams are likely to be raising their game against.
Well, I think you've made a valid point before we move on in this podcast, is that surely the reason you enter a competition is you want to go as far as possible in that competition. And whilst we went to the quarterfinals in the Champions League, this time round we'd be fourth seeds. We can't say realistically, but potentially we could get knocked out maybe in last place and not have any more football. So surely you'd like to go deeper into a competition. Yes, it's not as elite as the Champions League, but there's still a lot of good teams in Europa League. And for me, it's not the end of the world qualifying for the Europa League. I think it's an exciting tournament to be a part of, but in the circumstances of us qualifying for it, potentially it'd be disappointing, because we were like 7-1 on to get the Champions League. Now we're 12-5. So it's the bookies don't fancy us. I don't particularly fancy us, but we'll preview that later on.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. I think Top pretty much put the whole debate to bed, didn't he, about whether Leicester fans are allowed to be disappointed if we don't get the top four, where he basically said the expectations are fluid, because of course they are. We overperformed probably in the first half of the season, overperformed our level, but we gave ourselves such a good position. So to lose that potentially is still very disappointing. But let's talk about a couple of the other performances from the last couple of games that have stood out. Now, I thought against Sheffield United that Youri Tielemans was one of the best players on the pitch. He struggled a bit more against Spurs, but it raises the question, Ed, about Tielemans playing in the midfield too, and whether he is better in that sort of shape. What do you make of that?
Well, he has certainly picked up since Maddison's not been in the team. But I think in part that's to do with he's got more freedom to be attacking, whereas that was Maddison's role, I guess. But I don't know. I think it's sort of sidestepping the question a little bit. I think the issue for the Spurs game wasn't necessarily Tielemans' fault. I think there was tactical issues with the formation. I think you have to pick the formation and the system based on who you're playing, and having those three slow centre backs against Son, Moura, and Kane, and then that because it was a midfield two, at times there was quite a gap between that midfield two and the back three. It's like every time they got the ball and countered, it was just like I thought they were going to score. And it was a bit embarrassing at times when they were just putting our defenders on their arses.
On their knees in some cases.
Oh, yeah, quite literally. And it's just like, if we changed that formation a bit and had sort of like, I don't know, like, yes, a midfield two, but a back four and indeed slightly deeper, you know, that wouldn't have happened, and it wouldn't have exposed Tielemans as much. Because he wouldn't have been required to do all that defensive work. Whereas I guess against Sheffield United, that was a very good system to have picked. It was tight at the back, and you know, their strikers weren't the paciest and were up for that aerial battle, which our defenders excel at. So we don't have an issue there. But against teams that have got pace, playing an often high-lined back three, again, they're just ran in behind us. I don't think that was Tielemans' fault as such. So, yeah, in a roundabout way, going back to the actual question you asked, yeah, I think he's done well since the restart, and I think the system's helped with that more freedom. But I think he was exposed a bit through perhaps no fault of his own against Spurs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, speaking of the formation, as you say about it working against the, you know, certain teams are playing a different way. Did you see what Mourinho said about the game in his post-match comments?
Well, share with the listeners what he said.
Well, he basically, in something that's fairly novel, is he came out and pretty much gave away his game plan and what they tried to do, saying that he said that they tried to drop deep and allow Leicester's back three to have the ball because they're not comfortable playing in that shape. And he said that we wanted to let the likes of Bennett and Morgan have the ball, draw them out, and then counter quickly. And I mean, whilst that's kind of, I don't know whether that's insulting or patronising or just being refreshingly honest, I don't know. But you can tell that is what they tried to do, and it definitely worked, didn't it?
Like, it's no disrespect to at least two of the back three. Like, obviously Evans has been awesome this season, and since he ever signed in a back four, Morgan's been, well, a legend. Like, I won't say anything bad about him, but they're just like three big, strong guys, and then there was a big gap between the midfield, and you just let them have it. None of them are like mega ball playing centre backs, and more traditional. Boot it out, big header. They're not going to start these move from the back, so let them have it. They'll mess up, and as soon as they got it, they just ran at them, and it's like men against boys. Really, they were backtracking the defence, and they literally just ended up falling over.
Yeah, this is the thing that frustrates me, because I do agree with you, and any football manager enthusiast out there will say that, you know, Wes Morgan and Bennett are just like blockers or traditional, you know, just play him as a defender. They're not ball playing defenders. But what I can't forgive him for, or Bennett in this case, is that as an experienced defender, he wasn't even doing the basics correctly. He was showing Kane in on his strong foot and literally shielding like that. That was a perfect finish for Kane, really top class. I don't know what he was doing defending against Son. Like, he wasn't doing the basics correctly, so we didn't get caught out because we were playing out from the back. You know, we got caught out because we couldn't defend, and these are experienced players.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is a defence with the issue, like, against, like, and again, I appreciate some of these were young players who are nowhere near the top of where they're going to eventually get. You know, Spurs got a very good attack when they're in form. You know, up there with the best in the league, really. They were against a back five of Morgan, who hasn't played, Bennett, who hasn't impressed, who doesn't really play in a back three, and then Thomas and Justin, who are like not proven at this level, and young, inexperienced players, and it was just like, you know, a bit of a shit show, wasn't it? Really.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm actually of the opinion that Morgan was excellent in both games. I don't think he was at fault for either of the goals. I think he stood up well. I mean, he managed to pull out a Cruyff turn on one of the Spurs players who I presume has gone into hiding out of embarrassment. But I thought
I think Morgan did get exposed a bit below by not a fully match fit Harry Kane. To be fair, I think there was occasions where he got turned. He got bullied by Harry Kane actually on one occasion, thankfully. But to be fair, got back and got a foot in, got a block in. But
I know we're talking
winning season. You wouldn't have seen Wes Morgan get shrugged off the ball, literally shrugged off the ball like that.
I know we're talking 36-year-old Wes Morgan, not played all season against, regardless of whether he's match fit or not, a world-class striker in Harry Kane. I mean, I think with everything considered, he did pretty well. He's not a player that you want to be your first choice anymore, which I don't think is on to say. But I think when people saw his name on the team sheet, he was unfairly written off almost by some. So I think it's fair to say that he did very, very well, especially against Sheffield United. I thought he was absolutely excellent.
It is a funny one though, and I know I mentioned it last week, but everyone was raving about Ryan Bennett after that first appearance. Yeah. He couldn't have gone any worse for him since. Like, literally, it's
no different like James Justin, though, is it? Like one good performance and think, oh, great player, great signing. And at the end of the day, it's just like they're obviously excellent footballers, but relative to what we had before, it's just like a massive step down.
Yeah. I think Bennett, not Bennett, Justin was better in the last couple of games. I think he had a nightmare against Bournemouth. But he's a young player who probably wasn't expecting to be consistently starting at this point, was he? He's just sort of filling in the gaps. And again, that comes back to, like Chris said, the gap between our first and second string is quite wide at times. But I mean, so a player that has, I know he started a lot of games, but he's played in a new position for the team, which is Perez playing at that number 10 role that had previously been Maddison. I think he's dropped two of his best performances for us in his last couple of games. I mean, Chris, do you think that he was not written off, but perhaps disregarded a little bit by some fans a bit too early?
Well, yeah, I think what I wrote down watching him is I think he's just been a very, very slow adapter to Leicester City, but I think he's showing real signs of promise. Over the last couple of performances, he's not done anything like, well, obviously he scored, to be fair, so that's quite good against Sheffield United. And that was a really neat finish as well, to be fair. No backlift, really, really lovely strike. And he almost added to that tally yesterday with what would have been a fantastic volley, to be fair. But no, he's been getting on with his business steady. I think he's one of those players that throughout the season has probably been registering 6s and 7s, which is, average. But I think he has got potential to really kick on if given the game time. So I'm optimistic with him. I think he was a big money signing and he's not necessarily delivered, but I do think he's showing signs of promise. And next season he'll have no excuses. He would have been here for a year. But I'm optimistic in him, to be fair.
And talking of writing off players, I mean, I've done it a few times as well, so I'm well in with everyone else here. But Damari Gray, two decent sub performances, obviously a goal. He looked eager to be on the ball against Spurs. Did we write him off too early? Is there still a place for Gray at Leicester?
I don't think there is. I think the time's been and gone. Like, I don't doubt there's a good footballer in there, but I guess at certain points in your career, you probably need to be playing every week. And like, what he's going to have to do a lot to be seen as like a regular in the starting 11. Either that or we're going to have a serious injury crisis. And I just don't see it. Like, he came on, and I didn't think he was bad. I think he actually looked quite nippy. It's nice to see a player that had maybe a little bit of flair and trying to do some fancy step overs or whatever. Maybe that's just, it looks good rather than being productive. But I just never, for the whole team, I guess, but I think he sort of captured it. Like, I just felt there was a lot of moving into the middle of the pitch and just passing it around without having much go forward thrust and actually trying to create something. It seemed to me just to be like passing it out to the wing and then crossing it in, which invariably no one gets on the end of, and then it's back to square one. So I don't know.
Well, that's what I think my biggest frustration with him is as well. Like, ultimately, he's coming on as a wide man or a winger, but again, if you see a heat map of his touches, they're all mostly in the centre of the pitch, which I guess some pundits will argue that that's the modern way of not a modern way of a winger. It's sort of like an inside forward, but ultimately, if we want a wide man to do a wide job, I'd rather see someone like Sarr or Watford who's literally getting to the byline, beating a man and putting in a really good cross. But like Ed says, I see Gray as a player who, it's all well and good doing like a step over and stuff and looking really enthusiastic, but ultimately his end product isn't really leading to much. So I don't see him starting for us, but whether or not we can afford to get rid of him, again, because we're just going to get exposed. Like, he's probably one of the more optimistic people we can bring off the bench. If we get rid of him, who are we going to be left with?
Well, see, I mean, I personally think he had a reasonable impact. His set pieces were pretty good. As well, they were better, which isn't saying a lot because I think we had 13 corners. I don't think we really threatened with any of them in the last game. But I think if someone comes in with a silly offer, then I think the club will probably take it, won't they? But we'll wait and see. So one of the other players who I think has had a bit of a weird time of it lately is Hamza Choudhury. So obviously he sort of it was a bit of rotation in with Indeed, wasn't he, for a little while. He seemed to be the go-to man if we needed to shore a game up. He was playing a lot of minutes. Since the restart, he's played 20 minutes. Doesn't seem to feature in Rodgers' plans, as it were. Why do you think that is? Why does he not seem to favour Choudhury at all? Even brought on Mendy last game, for example.
I think part of bringing on Mendy is, the reports are that players are wanting, the club's wanting him to sign a contract extension, aren't they? His contract's running out at the end of the season, and I don't know. I just feel like maybe the thinking is maybe he'll be more likely to stay if we give him more minutes. But either way, it's just like I don't see him or Mendy, to be honest, as being like anything for the future other than like rotation players. So like maybe now it's let's stop pissing around a bit. We need to pull a finger out or we are going to lose it. So is less likely to trust a player like that who's I don't know, but then again he did bring on HIRST and has been playing the youngster at left back as well, but I don't know. I don't think he's ready anyway. He'd probably benefit from a loan next season if we can get somebody in to sort of be a rotation option for Indeed.
Do you agree with that, Chris? Is Choudhury not ready yet for first team football?
I don't know. I think that's a bold claim. I think he is ready. I think there's elements of his game he probably has to work on. Like
his league case inside, would you reckon he'd start for then, other than Leicester, or even be on the bench for?
Well, yeah, that's where we need to be realistic. Are we a Champions League team? We're not, are we? So,
which Europa League chase inside would he start for or be on the bench for?
Well, yeah, I can see your point, but I'm saying if we start getting rid of these players, we have to at least replace them with one other player. So maybe my argument's more based on let's just chill out and keep players who are actually, like I say, average, because unless we replace that with anything better, we're just depleting our squad. And with potentially more games next year, you want to get rid of Gray, you want to get rid of Choudhury, you'd get rid of Mendy. Like, these are all players that need to be replaced. And you're an advocate of saying, has so and so got 2 or 3 games in him a week? Until we get more players in that squad, then keep hold of everyone you can, whether or not they're good enough, because we ain't got another option, and it's highly unlikely, and there'll be other reasons. If, say, we went and got 8 players, then there'll be a problem with integration. Like it's a lose-lose situation from what I'm seeing. And just before I sound too negative, like I'm conscious that, first of all, I just want to disclaimer, none of us here are Rodgers out, and that we're conscious of that in this podcast, but I'm also conscious of being realistic that we can't just live in this ideology that we're going to replace all these players. Like realistically, I think we're going to add 3 or 4 players, and is that enough to lead a charge next year? I'm not so sure.
Oh no, well, I don't think we'll be. There's some more negativity. Sorry, and I don't think we'll be able to lead a charge even if we do get 3 or 4 good players in. Like, just we've shown. I guess we've said all season actually that whilst the starting 11's really is great, we've got depth issues. But I guess where we end up at the end of the season is not just dependent on us anyway. It's dependent on other teams, and all the traditional bigger clubs have come back from this break and are performing considerably better, and they've also started investing big time for next season. Teams like Chelsea, for example, already have great strength in depth, but they're spending big money. Man U always do. Arsenal may have even started pulling their finger out, which is a shock after their season. So there's 5 teams already. So are we going to be able to compete with them with just the addition of 1 or 2 excellent players and 1 or 2 squad players? I just don't see it.
Well, I think this conversation deepens further that what are the potential repercussions of not qualifying for the Champions League? Are we likely to hold on to our full complement of players, or do we feel that there could be certain heads that will be turned with Champions League football? Chelsea are making they're not playing any games. They're going out and they're linked with Kai Havertz. That would be a fantastic signing. They're obviously linked in terms of our players, Ben Chilwell. Are we able to persuade these players, look, give us 1 more season, because what can we actually offer them that a Champions League already qualified club can't? Because if you look at us and Chelsea, both young squads, exciting young managers, why would you stay at Leicester other than loyalty? Do you know what I mean? So what are the repercussions of not qualifying for the Elite League in the Champions League? We could lose even more players potentially, and not be able to attract the proper good players either.
What do you think, Jamie?
I was letting you to talk this out. I was interested in hearing your opinion, but I agree with Chris in that I think there will be 1 or 2 players within our squad who will be wanting to play Champions League football next year, who may well be pushing for a move, should we say. I think Chilwell's off, definitely, if we don't. Maddison, I'm not sure about Maddison, but he'll certainly be tempted. The one that really worries me is Pereira. I think he's shown just how good, how important he is to Leicester in his absence. So there are massive permutations should we not qualify, because of course, whilst we're certainly no longer in the driving seat, it's not over yet. Fat Lady's warming up, but she's not fully singing yet, is she? So there's still a chance that we might do it. But I think we need to as well in order to spend money. I think there's been some comments made that the only way there will be heavy investment, or even any investment into the squad, is if we are in the Champions League. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that is what would worry me. If that answered your question.
Well, I just think that it's hard to come across sort of positive, but that's almost ignorant of the potential risks that face us in the upcoming few weeks in the off season. I just feel that it's all well and good getting high tariff fees for these players, but if we're going to be splurging it on some mid-table French unknowns that we have in the past, it's tricky. Like Gazal, what are we even going to do with him? Like, is he the sort of player that we bring back and give a chance to again? He falls into that category of, can we afford just to not give him a chance? But again, that we're just starting to sound a bit like cheap in terms of like, what reasons are there for us to be in the same discussion as teams who are competing for Champions League or even Europa League? Because on the face of it, these other teams don't have such problems.
Yeah, I think should we keep a majority of the squad together and add and manage to add a creative player, either a winger or an attacking midfielder, I do think we've got a very good first team. But like you said, it's whether the young players can sort of develop and get themselves into first team standard and sort of close the gap almost on the team around us, because that is where we are lacking at the moment, I think. But great potential within the squad. I mean, you think the average age is low 20s, isn't it? There's some great players coming through. We'll damn sure get paid pretty well for them if any of them do leave. So we're not in a terrible position, are we? I think we can acknowledge that we at least have a good foundation to try to build upon, right?
Oh yeah, we're not in a bad position at all. And if we were, like, the best case scenario is we hold on to all these players and add to it. But whether or not that happens, we'll see. But it's just worrying, because normally you get like paper talk and stuff, and like we're getting linked with players like Todd Cantwell and stuff. But there's nothing that's like there's nothing head turning going on for us. So unless we're being very quiet and operating behind the scenes, we just hope it's not a quiet window like January was.
So 2 players are linked so far. Very quickly, if we can get. Whether you think it'd be a good signing or not. Once again, linked with Adam Lallana. We're one of 4 clubs apparently looking at him. Would be a free transfer. Both of you, yes or no to that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. The other one, apparently it's between us and Newcastle, with a couple of other big teams as well. I mentioned the likes of Bayern Munich apparently tracking him, is Todd Cantwell of Norwich, which, Chris, I know you just mentioned. If we can get him for, let's say, hopefully a reasonable value, yes or no?
Yeah.
So, what did you say?
Would you find Todd Cantwell, basically?
Yeah, what did Ed say?
Yeah.
He said yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I would take him. I think it's quoted for 30 million, so I think that's reasonable in this day and age.
Yeah, I think he's the sort of player that we need, actually. I know the links weren't greeted with overriding enthusiasm, should we say, but I think that he would be a good addition. Right, so listen, let's look ahead to, obviously we've got 1 game to play. United and Chelsea, of course, have 2 remaining. We know roughly what the permutations are, but just to remind everyone that at the time of recording, Chelsea, of course, have a game and Man U both have their game in hand. So look, if let's just assume that Chelsea are going to win at least one of their 2 games, just for argument's sake, even though they have 2 difficult games coming up against Liverpool and Wolves. Of course, if they lose both of those, a draw in our game against Man United will be enough for us both to qualify. But assuming that we're only fighting for 4th place, as it stands, if Man U win in their game against West Ham by 1 or 2 goals, Leicester only need to win in order to qualify, is how the maths works out. But if they win by 3 or 4, Leicester are going to need to beat Man U by a 2-goal margin. What's your confidence level like knowing that?
It's just hard to find confidence. Like, the only positive I can bring is Man United had fewer days to prepare for their FA Cup semi-final, and ultimately it showed, whether that be through team selection or fatigue, whatever. It was a questionable team selection, which made me think that, is it all aboard the top 4 train, which would go against my silverware is important theory. But nonetheless, it happened. And the same predicament will face Man United ahead of their journey to Leicester on Sunday. So if lightning does strike twice, they're in for a game. But that's the only positive I can shine on it. On paper, they've got the better squad. They've been more efficient in front of goal. They're more in form than us. They've been out of the Champions League, which is longer than what they expected to be out of it. There's not many. You'd struggle to formulate an argument for us to beat them on the day if it's just 2 sets of players going head to head.
I mean, so we played obviously 5 at the back against Spurs and Sheffield United. Sheffield United did try and come out and play a little bit, but granted they played into our hands. Spurs, as we've said, played on the counter. United aren't going to do that, are they, realistically? With the strength that they have in their attacking players, they're going to come out and play a bit. Do you think that there is a chance that we could try and play on the counter and pull something off?
If we play 3 at the back, those 3 centre-backs, against Greenwood, Martial, Rashford and James off the bench, we will be embarrassed.
I'll tell you what, Lingard's gone all season without registering an assist or a goal. If we want to give someone else a record, which we've been doing lately, we'll give Lingard a hat-trick. Because I can see that.
Yeah, they are fast, and I would go to a back 4, personally. But to be honest, I think the damage will be done by then. I think, especially after their bad performance against Chelsea, they got, in the semis, got thrashed, really. They'll sort of know that if they do a job on West Ham, win by 2-3, which isn't inconceivable given their form in the league, you go into the end of the day knowing they only need a draw to get in the Champions League, and with our leaky defence and their good attack, it's hard to see them not scoring 1 or 2 against us, however well we play. So they back themselves not to concede a load of goals. So again, negative vibes, but it's an uphill battle, isn't it? We shouldn't have put ourselves in a position in the first place.
I mean, there's still a lot of football to be played in there. I mean, you look at the fixtures that Chelsea have got. So obviously they've got Liverpool, who want to bounce back after the criticisms that they were given with their last result, and then they play Wolves, who of course aren't even guaranteed to get 6th place now, with Tottenham suddenly finding form, so they need to win both games. United are playing West Ham, who their season is over. Realistically, I can't see Villa picking up two wins, so they are almost safe, but they've hit a bit of form at a good time. So results could potentially go our way, could they not?
Yeah, but what we're saying is ultimately, if we lose to United, it's not good enough.
No. Which is, if we lose to them, then it is as it is. But I mean, I don't know. I still think that we've got the potential to at least threaten to get an upset. And I think if we need a draw, then it's whether Rodgers is willing to compromise on his style and the way that he wants to play in order to get a result, because that is something that he's not done in his recent games, isn't it?
Are you suggesting that we play for a draw?
No, just that we try and play slightly more sensibly instead of having Morgan, Evans and Bennett as like ball playing centre backs trying to carry it out. Maybe just do almost what Tottenham did. Be happy to concede the possession. Use the fact that we've got some seriously fast players within our squad. Try and hit teams on the counter instead of wanting to dominate possession. I mean, obviously, if neither team want the ball, then that'll be a pretty bad game of football. But we've got to try and play to the strengths of the squad we have available, haven't we?
Well, don't get me wrong. I would love to see the occasional ball lofted over the top, Harry Maguire or Jamie Vardy versus Harry Maguire, foot race. Just the old school Leicester. I'd love to see that, and Vardy going through on goal against De Gea of all keepers right now. Come on, we need to see that. So yeah, I'd agree with you. I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. I thought you said let's play for a draw, but yeah, if you're saying let's just go back to basics and turn them over, I'm all for that.
Yeah, it was just more because I think it's shown that Rodgers is not the most flexible, and he's quite unwilling to move away from his perceived notion of how the game should be played. Is what I've taken from the last couple of games. It's horses for courses, isn't it, as the old adage says. Now, I believe that we did our predictions for the games earlier this year. Now, Ed, we can't wait 15 minutes for your spreadsheet to fire up. But do you have it to hand?
Yes, I've got it to hand.
Right. What did Chris and I say for the last game?
Well, the Sheffield United, Chris said 0-0, and then said Leicester would beat Spurs 1-0. Jamie said Sheffield United 1-1 and then 0-0 against Spurs.
We were feeling optimistic after Bournemouth, weren't we?
Mm-hmm. Ed said 2-0 win against Sheffield United.
That's annoying.
Yeah, what was the score?
3-0.
It was 2-0, wasn't it? Yeah. Then I said withdraw 1-1 against Spurs, so only half points for me.
Right, okay, so that's not filled anyone with confidence listening that these predictions are worth even the time. But go on, ahead of the Man U game, did we predict those already?
No.
Right, come on then, you can go first, seeing as you're the only one to get something even half right.
We're going to lose 2-1.
That's more that. You know what? That's more encouraging than I thought you were going to be. So that's take that.
But I think the damage will be done before then anyway. Because I think Man U will probably beat West Ham by 2 to 3 goals, and I also see, if you really want an in-depth prediction, I think they'll score early against us as well. So it'll just be like, what's even the point?
Okay, fair enough. If anyone has managed to get through to the end of this podcast with a smile on their face, please let me know. I can't see. We're trying our best to be positive. Chris, what would you say then?
No, I can't go out on a limp one on my last prediction. It's going to have to be full fox tinted glasses on here.
Yeah.
I am going to go out on a Mosen bang of 4-1 Leicester.
4.
Right. I
think 4-1, and Vardy will get a hat trick.
If Leicester beat Man U 4-1, I will go into the street in as much Leicester kit as I can find and straight arm a beer for you. I just can't. I mean, I'd love it. I'd be happy to do it as well. Fair enough. That is a Mosen bang. That's as optimistic as you're going to find. Like it a lot. I'll say that we're going to draw 2-2, but also I think that the league's form player, one of the finest footballers of his generation, which is obviously Antonio, is going to turn up against Man U, and he's going to score again. What's he got, like 5 goals in his last 2 games?
Yeah. You're saying that Leicester will draw against Man U but still qualify for the Champions League?
Correct.
Could that be enough to get third if results go our way?
If Chelsea lose both of their games and West Ham beat United and then we draw 2-2, we finish third.
Ooh, could it not be if Chelsea lose both, Leicester and Man U could play out a draw on the last day of the season? And
I mean, I'm not sure what the legality is of asking Schmeichel just to sit on the ball for 90 minutes. But
our players are almost certainly in touch with Maguire still, and look,
all the games get played at the same time, which would poo-poo any chance of that happening.
Because I think what you're describing, Ed, is match fixing. There's a whole thing set up to stop that happening, I believe.
Yeah. How would people feel if on the last game of the season, Man U basically knock us out of the Champions League and their captain Harry Maguire goes off the pitch with a smirk on his face?
That will happen. I don't think Maguire has any loyalties to us at all. I think he's proven that earlier in the season.
I mean, the fans kicked off somewhat when Chilwell had a smile after the game. Imagine if it was Maguire.
They'd probably still hate Chilwell more.
If they did, he's not going to be sad, is he? So.
No, and I think after we sang certain songs about him and our Turkish replacement, could be interesting. Right, predictions in. Fingers crossed. You never do know. So obviously there's a lot of football going to be played before our next podcast. I certainly hope that.
The positive is one of us will have got the right result for once.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, we've got all 3 bases covered, haven't we? Let's see. So, listen, thank you to everyone that has listened. Made it through the end, as always. We do really appreciate it. Please do subscribe on whatever platform you get your podcasts, and we will be back in a week or so. and hopefully I'm still hungover from straight arming beers in the street because Leicester won 4-1. But we will see you then.
See ya.